She thought she was saving a stranger. But the woman she pulled from death's grip was the mother of Chicago's most feared Korean Mafia boss. And before the ambulance lights stopped flashing, that woman had already claimed her as a daughter-in-law. Most people in Chicago's Koreatown whispered the same warning to newcomers. Don't ever cross paths with Madame Saw Minja. The mother of the man who controlled every shadow in the city wasn't just wealthy. She was a legend. Fierce, sharp-tongued, loyal until her last breath. If you upset her, you upset an empire that stretched from the Gold Coast to Seoul. Men had disappeared for less than a sideways glance in her direction. But on one dangerous evening, Madame So crossed paths with someone nobody expected. A waitress in a powder blue uniform, natural curls pulled back with a hair tie, dark skin glowing under the streetlights of Michigan Avenue. A girl who smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls. A girl who had $17 in her pocket and a little brother waiting for dinner at home. And that girl saved her life. The evening traffic on State Street was chaos as usual. Honking, heat rising from the pavement, the smell of exhaust mixing with deep dish pizza from the corner shop. Madame Saw's black Mercedes sat at the signal, windows cracked to let in the September air. She was returning from Oakwood Cemetery, where she visited her late husband's grave every month without fail. Her driver, Mr. Park, stepped out to check on a strange sound from the engine. For 30 seconds, she was alone. And that's when it happened. A delivery truck barreled through the red light, brakes screaming, horn blaring. The driver had fallen asleep. 2 tons of steel hurtled toward the Mercedes like a missile locked on target. People on the sidewalk screamed. Some ran. Some froze. But one woman moved. Ava Carter, 24 years old, closing shift at Rosie's Diner, saw it all unfold in slow motion. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She dropped her bag of leftovers, sprinted into the street, and yanked the elderly woman through the open car door with every ounce of strength her exhausted body possessed. They crashed onto the concrete together. Pain exploded through Ava's hip and elbow, her uniform ripped at the shoulder. Blood seeped through the pale blue fabric. Behind them, metal screamed against metal. The Mercedes folded like paper. Glass erupted into the air like deadly confetti. The impact shook the ground beneath them. Madame Saw gasped, trembling violently. Her silk cardigan was torn. Her silver hair had come loose from its elegant twist. But she was alive. She stared at the young black woman who had just thrown herself into traffic for a complete stranger. "You," her voice cracked. "You saved me?" Ava nodded, chest heaving, heart slamming against her ribs. "I saw it coming. You didn't move. I just reacted." No hesitation, no calculation, no asking what she might get in return. Just instinct. Just heart. Madame Sir's eyes filled with tears as sirens wailed in the distance. She gripped Ava's hand with surprising strength and whispered something in Korean that Ava couldn't understand. But she would learn its meaning soon enough. It meant, "You belong to us now." 12 hours earlier, Ava Carter's biggest problem had been the electric bill. She stood in the cramped kitchen of Rosie's Diner on the south side of Chicago, scraping burnt cheese off a grill that was older than she was. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects. Her feet throbbed inside her worn sneakers. This was her second shift today, and she still had 3 hours to go. "Ava! Table 7's complaining about cold coffee again!" She didn't even flinch. Just grabbed the pot and headed out to the floor,
plastic smile already fixed in place. Rosie's diner wasn't much. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played half its songs, regulars who tipped in quarters, and complaints. But it paid the rent on the tiny apartment she shared with her 17-year-old brother, Marcus. Barely. Their mother had passed 2 years ago. Cancer. The kind that insurance doesn't cover and prayers don't cure. Their father had been gone long before that. A ghost who sent birthday cards from Detroit every few years, when he remembered he had kids. So Ava worked. Double shifts, triple when she could get them. Whatever it took to keep Marcus in school, keep food in the refrigerator, keep the lights on. She refilled Table 7's coffee with a steady hand and an apology she didn't mean. The customer grunted without looking up from his phone. She moved on to the next table, and the next, until her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. By 9 o'clock, the dinner rush had faded to a trickle. Ava wiped down the counter, watching the last few customers through tired eyes. A couple arguing quietly in the corner booth. A truck driver working through a slice of apple pie. An old man reading yesterday's Tribune. Normal people living normal lives. She wondered sometimes what that felt like.
"Go ahead and take off,"
Rosie called from the back.
"I'll close up tonight."
Ava almost cried with relief.
"You sure? Get out of here before I change my mind."
She didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her bag, stuffed with leftover rolls she'd saved for Marcus, and headed out the back door into the alley. The September air hit her face like a cool cloth. She breathed deep, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The L train rumbled overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed its endless complaint. Chicago. Loud, dirty, exhausting. Home. She cut through the alley towards State Street, taking her usual shortcut past the fancy restaurants and boutiques that catered to tourists and tech workers. Places she could never afford to enter. She walked fast, eyes down, invisible in her blue uniform. Just another service worker, blending into the background of the city. That's when she
heard the screaming. Her head snapped up. People on the sidewalk were pointing, running, shouting in a dozen languages. She followed their gaze and saw it. A delivery truck careening down the street, completely out of control, and directly in its path sat a black Mercedes with its door hanging open. Inside, an elderly woman in a beige cardigan sat frozen, eyes wide with confusion. Time slowed. Ava's bag hit the ground. Her feet moved before her brain caught up. She was sprinting into the street, dodging a cyclist, leaping over a parking meter. The truck's horn screamed. The woman still hadn't moved. 3 seconds. 2. Ava reached into the car, grabbed the woman's arm, and pulled with everything she had. They hit the pavement together as the world exploded behind them. The first thing Ava noticed was the shoes. She was lying on the concrete, ears ringing, hip throbbing, when a circle of men surrounded her and the elderly woman. But these weren't paramedics. These were men in tailored black suits and handmade Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. One of them barked orders in Korean. Another was already on the phone, voice low and urgent. "Ma'am?" Ava tried to push herself up. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The elderly woman was trembling, but her grip on Ava's hand was iron. She wouldn't let go. Her eyes, dark and sharp despite her age, were fixed on Ava's face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What is your name?" The woman's English was accented but perfect. "Ava. Ava Carter." "Ava." She said it slowly, like she was tasting it. "You saved my life. Anyone would have—" "No." The woman's voice hardened. "No one else moved. I watched. They all stood there. Only you." Before Ava could respond, the circle of men parted like a black sea, and through the gap walked a man who made the air itself seem to hold its breath. He was tall, Korean, mid-30s maybe, black suit that fit like a second skin, hair swept back from a face that belonged on a magazine cover. If magazines featured men with cold, calculating eyes, and a neck tattoo that crept up from his collar like a dark promise. He moved like a predator, controlled, precise, every step deliberate. The other men stepped back as he approached, not out of respect, out of fear. Amma. His voice was deep, clipped. He knelt beside the elderly woman, hands running over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries. What happened?
The truck. It came out of nowhere.
She pointed at Ava.
This girl. She pulled me out.
The man turned. For one suspended moment, his eyes met Ava's. She felt it like a physical impact, like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. But there was no warmth in that gaze, only assessment, calculation. The look of a man who weighed every person he encountered on a scale of usefulness and threat. You. It wasn't a question.
Me.
She didn't know why she said it like that. A challenge in her voice she couldn't quite suppress. His jaw tightened. His gaze dropped to her elbow, where blood was seeping through her torn sleeve. You're injured. It's nothing. You're bleeding. I've had worse. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or something harder to name. Get her cleaned up, he ordered one of his men. Call Dr. Kim. Ava pulled her arm back.
I don't need a doctor. I need to get home. My brother's waiting for dinner.
The man stared at her like she'd spoken in tongues. Around them, the other suits exchanged glances. Apparently, no one said no to this man. You saved my mother's life, he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. You're not walking away with a bleeding arm and a bag of dinner rolls. Watch me. She tried to stand. Her hips screamed in protest, and she stumbled. He caught her, one hand on her waist, steadying her with an ease that suggested he'd caught falling things before. Heavier things. Dangerous things. Stubborn, he murmured. Practical. Behind them, Madame So laughed. It was a strange sound in the chaos, warm and wondering.
Junhyuk,
she said to her son.
I like this one.
Kang Junhyuk had built his empire on 3 principles: silence, precision, and the absolute absence of sentiment. He'd inherited control of the Kang syndicate at 26, after his father's heart gave out during a negotiation with the Yakuza in Vancouver. He'd been raised in the shadow world since birth, taught to read lies in a man's eyes, to smell betrayal before it ripened, to make decisions that kept thousands fed and housed while ensuring enemies slept with one eye open. He did not believe in fate. He did not believe in coincidence. And he certainly did not believe that a waitress from a South Side diner had any place in his world. But his mother believed, and Madame So's beliefs had a way of becoming reality.
She stays,
his mother announced from her hospital bed, where she was being kept overnight for observation, despite her protests.
Until we know she is safe.
Junhyuk stood at the window, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the night. His reflection stared back, cold, composed, every emotion locked behind a door he'd welded shut years ago. She saved your life, Amma. We'll compensate her, generously. Then she returns to her life.
You don't understand.
His mother's voice carried that steel he'd inherited.
I was seen. The accident will be reported. People will talk. They already are.
She was right. His phone had been vibrating non-stop since the incident. His lieutenants reporting. His rivals probing. Everyone wanting to know, who was the woman with Madame Saw? What did she mean to the family? In his world, proximity was power, and power attracted predators. She's a civilian, he said. No connections to any family, no value as leverage.
She has value now, because of me. Because she was photographed holding my hand. Because by tomorrow, every syndicate from here to Seoul will know her face.
Jun-hyuk closed his eyes. His mother was right. Again. The Ava Carter problem wasn't going to disappear with a check and a thank you. Temporary protection, he conceded, until the attention dies down. However long it takes. He turned from the window. She won't agree. His mother smiled, that knowing smile that had always unnerved him, even as a child. She'll agree. She has a younger brother, 17, still in high school. She's been raising him alone since their mother died. No father, no family, no safety net. He felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he kept so carefully maintained. You researched her. I had Mr. Park make some calls while you were arranging security. She smoothed the hospital blanket over her lap. She works double shifts, sends money to pay off her mother's medical debts, hasn't bought herself new shoes in 2 years. And she ran into traffic to save an old woman she'd never met. His mother's eyes glistened. When was the last time someone did something for us without calculating the cost first? Jun-hyuk had no answer. In his world, everything was transaction. Loyalty bought, respect earned through fear. Love, if it existed at all, was leverage waiting to be exploited. But Ava Carter had looked at his mother and seen only a woman in danger, had thrown herself into harm's way without a single thought for what she might gain. It was either the purest thing he'd ever witnessed, or the most elaborate con he'd ever seen. Find out everything, he told his lieutenant as he left the hospital room. Everything. Ava woke up in a bedroom that cost more than she'd make in 10 years. For a moment, she just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Actual crown molding, like something from a period drama, trying to remember how she'd gotten here. The hospital. The insistence that she couldn't go home until arrangements were made. The black SUV with tinted windows. The silent elevator ride up to a penthouse that overlooked Lake Michigan like it owned the view. She sat up slowly. Her hip ached, wrapped in bandages that smelled like expensive medicine. Her elbow had been cleaned and dressed with more care than any clinic had ever shown her. Her phone was dead, her bag was gone, and when she tried the door, she found it unlocked. But a man in a black suit stood in the hallway, hands clasped, face blank. Good morning, Miss Carter. Breakfast is ready in the dining room. I need to call my brother. A phone will be provided after you've eaten. I need to call my brother now. The guard's expression didn't flicker. Mr. Kang will across your concerns shortly. Ava felt the first real spike of fear, not the adrenaline kind, not the split-second terror of the accident. This was slower, colder, the dawning realization that she'd stumbled into something much bigger than a good deed. She found the dining room by following the smell of food. A spread that would have fed her entire apartment building covered a table long enough for 12. Eggs, bacon, rice, soup, fruits she couldn't name, pastries arranged like edible art. Madame So sat at the head, looking healthier than she had any right to after nearly being crushed by a truck. She smiled when Ava entered. "Sit. Eat. You must be starving." "I need to call my brother. He's been contacted. He knows you're safe." "He doesn't know me to stay out all night without—" "He's been brought here." Ava's heart stopped. "What?" "For his protection, as well as yours." Madame So gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Let me explain." The fear crystallized into something sharper. Ava didn't sit. "Where is he?" "In the room next to yours, sleeping. He was quite resistant at first, but once he understood the situation—" "What situation?" Ava's voice rose. "You can't just take people. We're nobody. We have nothing to do with whatever this is." "You do now?" Madame So's voice softened, but her eyes remained steady. "Ava, I am grateful to you in ways I cannot express. But my gratitude has made you visible. There are people who would use you to hurt me, to hurt my son, and I will not allow that." "So what? We're prisoners?" "Guests. Under protection." "For how long?" Silence. Ava felt the walls closing in. This room, with its silk curtains and crystal chandeliers, was just a prettier version of a cell. She thought about her shifts at the diner, her tips jar at home, Marcus's upcoming SATs, the electric bill waiting on the kitchen counter. All of it, her entire small, struggling, precious life, suddenly felt impossibly far away. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. Madame So rose and crossed to her. Up close, she was smaller than Ava remembered, fragile almost. But her hand on Ava's arm was warm and firm. "No, you asked for nothing, and that's exactly why I cannot let you go." Within the Kang syndicate, loyalty was currency, and someone had been counterfeiting for years. Jun Hyuk stood in his office on the 40th floor of the Kang building, watching his head of security play a recording on a secured tablet. The voice was distorted, but the words were clear enough. "The old woman is vulnerable. The son is distracted. If we move now, while the organization is focused on this girl, we can take the ports in Vancouver before anyone notices." The recording ended. Silence hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "Who?" Jun Hyuk's voice was soft, the danger's kind of soft. "We're still tracing, but it came from inside. Someone with access to our communication channels." A traitor. In his own house. Jun Hyuk had suspected for months that someone was feeding information to the Park faction. Rivals who'd been nipping at his territory since his father's death. Shipments arriving to empty docks. Meetings raided by police who'd been paid to look elsewhere. Small cuts that bled the organization slowly. But this was different. This was an open move, and it centered on Ava. "Double the security on the penthouse," he ordered. "No one in or out without my direct authorization. And find me the leak. I don't care how long it takes, or what it costs." His lieutenant nodded and withdrew. Jun Hyuk turned back to the window, his reflection ghostly against the cityscape. The Ava Carter problem had just become the Ava Carter crisis. She wasn't just visible anymore. She was a target. Ava was in her borrowed room, trying to teach Marcus algebra through a door he refused to open, when the first shot was fired. The sound was distant, somewhere in the building below, but she'd grown up on the south side. She knew gunfire when she heard it. "Marcus!"
She pounded on his door. "Open up! Now!" The door flew open. Her brother's face was pale, his eyes too wide. "What's happening?" "I don't know. Stay behind me." They moved into the hallway. Guards were running, organized, silent, weapons drawn. One of them spotted Ava and immediately changed course. "Miss Carter, you need to come with me." "What's going on?" "Breach on the 35th floor. We're moving you to the secure room." "My brother—" "Both of you, now!" They were rushed through corridors Ava hadn't seen before, through a hidden door behind a bookshelf, into a room with steel walls and no windows. It looked like a bunker. Marcus grabbed her hand. He was trying to be brave, but she could feel him shaking. "Ava, what did you get us into?" Before she could answer, her phone, the new one they'd given her, buzzed with a message. Unknown number. 4 words. You should have run. The fear she'd been fighting crystallized into something else. Not terror. Not panic. Anger. She hadn't asked for any of this, hadn't wanted it. She'd just seen an old woman in danger and done what anyone should do. And now someone was trying to kill her for it. The door to the safe room opened. Jun Hyuk stepped in, jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, a cut on his cheek that was still bleeding. His eyes found Ava's immediately. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Your brother?" "Scared, but fine." He nodded once, then turned to his men. 3 dead. 2 of theirs, 1 of ours. They came through the service entrance. Someone gave them the codes. A traitor. Inside the building, and they'd come for her. 24 hours after the attack, Madame So called a meeting that would shatter everything. Ava sat in the penthouse living room, still wearing borrowed clothes, still trying to process that someone had tried to kill her in an actual firefight. Marcus was in the other room, with a tutor Madame So had apparently summoned from nowhere, because even in crisis, the woman insisted education mattered. Jun Hyuk stood by the window, a position Ava was starting to recognize as his default. His face revealed nothing, but something about the tension in his shoulders told her this wasn't a casual conversation. Madame So sat in her chair like a queen on a throne, hands folded, eyes bright with something that made Ava's stomach knot. "I have been
Thinking," the older woman began, "about how to solve our current dilemma. We've already increased security," Jun Hyuk said. "The leak will be found. The threat will be eliminated. And then what? We release Ava back into the world, where anyone who wants to hurt us knows exactly where to find her. Where she and her brother live alone in an apartment with locks that a child could pick. We could relocate them. New identities. New city. Running." Madame So's voice sharpened. "The Kang family does not run, and we do not abandon those under our protection." "Then what do you propose?" The silence stretched. Madame So turned to Ava, with that unsettling warmth in her eyes. "Marriage." The word hung in the air, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Ava laughed. It was involuntary, a burst of disbelief that echoed off the high ceilings. "I'm sorry. What?" "Marriage to my son. It would make you family. Untouchable. Anyone who harmed you would be declaring war on the entire Kang syndicate." "You're insane." "I'm practical." Madame So leaned forward. "You saved my life. I intend to save yours. This is the only way I know how." Ava turned to Jun Hyuk, expecting him to shut this down, to tell his mother she'd lost her mind. But his face was stone, unreadable, impossible. "You can't possibly agree with this," she said. "What I agree with doesn't matter." "It matters to me!"
I'm not marrying a stranger because it's convenient for your family politics. It's not about convenience. His voice was harder now. It's about survival. Yours. I didn't ask you to keep me alive. You didn't have to. Something crackled between them. Electricity, anger, something neither of them wanted to name. Ava stood. No, absolutely not. I appreciate what you've done for me, for Marcus, but I am not a piece on your chessboard. I'm a person, with a life, with choices. What choices? Madame So's voice softened. Go back to the diner. Wait tables until someone decides you're easier to kill than protect. Watch your brother look over his shoulder for the rest of his life. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But this is the reality you walked into when you pulled me from that car. Ava's throat burned. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to rewind the clock to that moment on State Street and walk the other way. But she'd never been that person. Not once in her life. I need time, she heard herself say. You have until tomorrow. Madame So's voice carried the weight of a woman who had seen too much death to tolerate hesitation. After that, my son will make the decision for both of you. Ava found Jun Hyuk on the rooftop at midnight, standing at the edge, like a man contemplating the drop. She'd slipped past the guards, easier than it should have been, and climbed the service stairs in bare feet, driven by a fury she couldn't contain anymore. The wind whipped her hair around her face as she stepped onto the concrete. You could have said no. He
Didn't turn. No, I couldn't.
Why? Because Mommy said so?
Now he turned. His eyes caught the city lights, glittering like broken glass. Because she's right, and you know it. Ava crossed to him, stopping close enough to see the faint scar on his jaw, the exhaustion beneath his controlled expression. I don't know anything. I don't know why someone wants me dead. I don't know why your mother looks at me like I'm some kind of miracle. I don't know why you... She stopped, swallowed. Why I what? Why you keep looking at me like you can't decide if I'm a problem to solve, or a person to... To what, Ava? Her name and his voice did something to her chest, something dangerous. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know anything anymore. The wind howled between them. Somewhere far below, sirens wailed their endless Chicago song. You want the truth? Jun Hyuk stepped closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke. I don't know either. I don't know why my mother insisted we keep you. I don't know why the thought of you leaving makes my chest tight. I don't know why, when they breached the building and I thought you might be hurt, I wanted to burn this entire city to the ground. Ava's breath caught. That's not... You don't even know me. I know you ran into traffic for a stranger. I know you argued with armed guards about calling your brother. I know you've been raising him alone since you were barely more than a child yourself, and you never once complained. You had me investigated. I had you protected. There's a difference. He reached up, and for a terrifying moment she thought he might touch her face. His hand stopped an inch away, trembling slightly. I don't do this. I don't feel this. I've spent my entire life building walls, and you walked through them like they were made of paper. Then stop looking at me like that. I can't. Try! I have been, for days. It doesn't work. Ava's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the wind. This was madness. This was a trap, dressed up in expensive suits and rooftop confessions. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a mafia boss.
She saw a man who had never been allowed to be weak, cracking open like a fault line. "Your mother wants me to marry you," she said quietly. "I know. Is that what you want?" The question hung between them. Jun Hyuk's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "What I want is irrelevant. What matters is keeping you alive." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I can give you." Ava stepped back. The cold rushed in where his warmth had been. "Then we have nothing else to talk about." She was almost to the door when his voice caught her. "Ava!" She stopped, didn't turn. "What I want," he said quietly, "is for you to have a choice. A real one, not just survival dressed up as freedom." She left without looking back, but his words followed her down 17 flights of stairs, into dreams she'd never admit to having.
They came for her on a Tuesday. Ava had finally convinced Madame So to let her visit her old apartment, just to collect some things, she'd argued, just to feel normal for an hour. The guards were doubled. The route was secured, every precaution taken. It wasn't enough. The black van materialized from an alley like a nightmare given wheels. It clipped the rear of the SUV, sending them spinning. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Ava's seatbelt locked against her chest as the world flipped sideways. Then hands. Rough hands, dragging her from the wreckage. She fought. Of course she fought. She'd been fighting her whole life. But there were too many. A needle pierced her neck. Cold flooded her veins. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Jun Hyuk's SUV screeching around the corner. Too late. Always too late. She woke in chains. Not metaphorical. Actual chains. Cold steel around her wrists, bolted to a wall in a room that smelled like rust and fear. A man sat across from her. Korean. Older. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Carter, we finally meet."
"Who are you?"
"Someone who's been watching the Kang family for a very long time. Someone who's been waiting for exactly the right leverage." He leaned forward. "And you, my dear, are perfect."
"I'm nobody."
"You're everything. The old woman's miracle. The Ice Prince's weakness." His smile widened. "Did you know he's torn apart half of Chinatown looking for you? He's made mistakes, exposed allies. All for a waitress." Ava's chest tightened.
"He's not coming."
"Oh, he's coming. That's the point." The man stood. "When he walks through that door to save you, we'll finally have the opening we've been waiting for. The great Kang Jun Hyuk, undone by sentiment. Poetic, don't you think?" Fear clawed at her throat. Not for herself, for him.
"If you hurt him..."
"You'll what? You're chained to a wall." She was. But she'd been trapped before. By poverty. By grief. By a world that kept telling her she was too small to matter. She'd never believed it. The door exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. Hinges tore from the frame. Dust and debris filled the air. And through the chaos walked Jun Hyuk. He wasn't the composed businessman she'd come to know. His suit was torn. Blood streaked his face. His own or someone else's, she couldn't tell. His eyes were wild, burning with something that looked like rage and relief and terror all twisted together. Behind him, his men poured in. Shots fired. Bodies fell. The man who'd been gloating moments ago scrambled for a weapon that wasn't there. Jun Hyuk crossed to Ava in 3 strides. His hands shook as he broke her chains. Actually shook. This man who never showed weakness. "Are you hurt?"
No,
Did they touch you?
no.
He pulled her against his chest. His heart slammed against her ear, fast and erratic. I thought... His voice cracked. I thought I'd lost you. Around them, the warehouse became a battleground. But in that moment, wrapped in
His arms. Ava felt something shift. This wasn't about protection anymore. This wasn't about debt or obligation or survival. This was something neither of them had asked for, and neither of them could deny. The traitor was dead. The rival faction was dismantled. And Ava Carter stood in Madame So's living room, finally ready to give her answer. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse. 3 weeks of healing, of conversations, of watching Jun-hyuk dismantle every enemy who'd threatened her with a precision that should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel something far more dangerous. Safe. I have conditions, she announced. Madame So raised an eyebrow. Jun-hyuk, standing by his eternal window, went very still. Conditions?
If I'm doing this, if I'm really doing this, it's on my terms.
Ava straightened her spine.
First, Marcus finishes school. Real school, not tutors in penthouse prisons. He applies to college wherever he wants and he goes. No guards, no surveillance. The boy would be vulnerable. The boy is my brother, and he deserves a normal life. That's non-negotiable.
Madame So glanced at her son. Something passed between them. A nod.
Agreed. What else? Second, I'm not giving up who I am. I'll learn your world. I'll stand beside your son in public, but I will not become some silent trophy wife who exists only to smile at parties. I have a voice, and I intend to use it.
Jun-hyuk's lips twitched, almost a smile. I wouldn't expect anything less.
Third, she turned to face him directly. This isn't a business arrangement. If I marry you, it's because I choose to, not because I'm scared, not because I have no other options, because I looked at every door and I walked through this one.
The room held its breath. Jun-hyuk crossed to her. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the healing cut on his cheek. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since she'd been taken. And what do you choose? His voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. Ava reached up and pressed her palm against his chest. Beneath the expensive fabric, his heart raced. I choose the man who tore apart a city to find me, who stood on a rooftop and admitted he was afraid, who both walls his whole life and let me walk through them anyway. His hand covered hers, warm, steady. Ava, I choose you, come Jun-hyuk. Not your empire, not your money. You. The kiss was inevitable. Soft at first, then deeper. A seal on a promise neither had expected to make. Behind them, Madame So dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, murmuring in Korean. When these finally broke apart, Jun-hyuk rested his forehead against hers. You know what you're getting into. This world, my world, it's not kind. Neither was mine, Ava smiles. But I survived it. I'll survive yours, too. Together. Together. The wedding was small, private, held in Madame So's garden at dawn, with cherry blossoms falling like pink snow. Ava wore white. Not traditional hanbok, not a designer gown, but a simple dress she'd chosen herself. Her curls were loose. Her feet were bare. Marcus walked her down the aisle, trying not to cry and failing completely.
And at the end of it, when the officiant asked if she took this man, Ava looked into Jun Hyuk's eyes and saw everything she'd never believed she'd have. Family, protection, love. Not given to her out of charity, claimed on her own terms.
I do,
she said. And in a world built on blood and silence, a waitress from the south side of Chicago became a queen. Not because she was saved, because she saved herself.